the fog-drenched village of Westbrook, New England, the year is 1986. It's a place where the days are short and the nights stretch into a seemingly endless silence, broken only by the hum of radios and the occasional crack of thunder. It's here we find Dave Shepard, a disc jockey on the edge of burnout. Dave had grown weary of his once beloved career. He was tired of the night shifts, the lonely hours, and now divorce papers left unsigned on his desk. Just last week, he'd agreed to a custody arrangement for his daughter. It was amicable, but that didn't make it any easier. And tonight, as the fog closed in and the storm brewed, Dave's life was about to be interrupted by something far stranger than anything he'd ever encountered. All right, Westbrook, this is Dave Shepard, bringing you another late-night session on WBEX. It's a foggy one out there tonight, thick enough to lose yourself in if you're not careful. Stay tuned, and I'll keep you company through this storm. Dave paused, leaning back in his chair. His voice was steady, calm, but he was anything but. He rubbed his temples, glancing at the storm outside. A thick mist blanketed the world beyond the window, muffling everything and making the tiny radio booth feel like a ship adrift in an ocean of fog. Then he heard it, a strange, low buzz emanating from the corner of his console. It wasn't part of his broadcast, and it wasn't feedback. That's not supposed to happen. He leaned closer, adjusting the dials. The sound grew louder, more insistent, a deep hum that seemed to vibrate through his bones. He hesitated, then reached for an old frequency dial he hadn't used in years. As he turned it, the hum sharpened into a garbled, disjointed voice. He could barely make out the words, but they sounded familiar. "Is that me?" The voice grew clearer. It was his own voice, as if recorded on some hidden loop, replaying a conversation he'd had just hours before with his soon-to-be ex-wife. Dave's voice on the frequency. "I just want to make this as easy as possible for her. We'll share custody, and I'll do my best to make it work." Dave's hand froze over the dials. He stared at the console, a chill creeping down his spine. He hadn't told anyone else about that conversation, and yet, here it was, his own words, echoing back to him through the static. He sat there listening, his mind reeling, trying to make sense of it. The voice on the radio continued, playing back moments he'd just lived, seconds, minutes ago. And then, just as suddenly, it cut out, leaving nothing but empty static. No, there's got to be an explanation for this. It's interference, that's all. But as the days passed, the strange broadcasts continued. Each night, when the storms rolled in, he'd hear snippets of his own life, playing back to him like a warped recording. At first, it was only things from his past, memories trapped in the airwaves. But soon it began predicting things he hadn't yet experienced. One night, as lightning flashed outside, he heard a new recording. Dave's voice on the frequency. "Listen, I'll be right back. I need to check the power in the back room. It'll just take a second." Dave's stomach twisted. He hadn't said those words yet, but he was certain he would. Something about it felt inevitable. He tried to resist, to prove the recording wrong, but he found himself rising from his chair, moving toward the back room. As he reached the door, his voice crackled over the radio again. Dave's voice on the frequency. "It's all falling apart, isn't it? I thought, maybe, just maybe, I could keep it all together." He stopped in his tracks. The voice was raw, broken, a reflection of the desperation he'd kept buried deep down. And as he stood there, frozen in the dim light of the radio booth, he felt a presence, a shadow just at the edge of his vision. He turned, but there was no one there. Only the empty room and the static that filled it. The frequency began to shift again, distorting and crackling, the voices now speaking of things yet to come. At first, they were mundane predictions, moments he hadn't yet lived, but soon would. But one night, as he sat alone in the storm-drenched booth, the frequency brought him a message that sent a chill through his entire body. Future Dave's voice on the frequency. Run. If you can hear this, run. It's coming for you. You don't have much time. Dave's heart pounded. He wanted to turn off the frequency, to leave the booth and never return. But he was rooted in place, a prisoner to his own morbid curiosity. The voice continued, growing louder, more insistent. Future Dave's voice on the frequency. Don't look behind you, Dave. Don't look. Against his better judgment, he turned. And there, in the dim glow of the booth, he caught a glimpse of something in the glass. A shadow, twisted and inhuman, watching him with hollow eyes. His breath hitched as the figure moved closer, closer, until it was right behind him. He could feel its cold presence, the hair on the back of his neck standing on end. The frequency began to fade, the voice growing weaker. Future Dave's voice on the frequency. This is where it ends, Dave. Don't fight it. It's already written. The room fell silent. The static died away, leaving only the pounding of Dave's heart and the soft patter of rain against the window. For a long moment he sat there, paralyzed, unable to move, unable to breathe. And then the frequency flickered back to life. But this time, it wasn't his voice he heard. It was the voice of his daughter, faint and distorted, calling out to him from somewhere beyond the static. Daughter's voice on the frequency. Daddy, where are you? I'm scared. The sound tore through him, cutting deeper than any fear he'd felt before. He reached for the dial, desperate to silence it, but the voice only grew louder, more frantic. Daughter's voice on the frequency. Please, Daddy, come home. Tears streamed down his face as he realized the horrifying truth. He'd become trapped in the endless cycle of the frequency, a prisoner to his own life, replaying and reliving each moment as it slipped further and further out of his control. And as the storm raged on outside, he sat there, waiting for the next voice to call out from the darkness.